Gerasene demoniac, that's his name. Gerasene demoniac, he had demons. But I'm not preaching about him this morning. I'm preaching about the first reading we had, about Elijah. Because Elijah doesn't understand that he has God with him. Elijah is like all of our Hebrew ancestors in the faith, keeps forgetting that God is a steadfast, abiding presence in his life, as he is in our life, and will never leave us. So let's see how he forgets again and again. We see that he's afraid of Jezebel and Ahab, and he has good reason to be afraid, because that is a bad king and who had an evil wife. And when she says she's going to kill him, just like he killed all the prophets they were worshiping many gods, many, many, many gods. And Elijah had a battle of the gods. It's like a battle of the titans. And Elijah said, if your gods, all 25 of them, can make it rain, I'll worship your gods. But if my God makes it rain, I'll prove that he's the only God, the one and only God, and you're going to throw away your gods. And you know who won that? God was with Elijah. God listened to Elijah. And he could see the thunder clouds coming from very far away, and they got closer, and they got closer, and then they poured down water so that everyone was afraid of Elijah, because he had the power of this one God behind him. So anyway, he kills all their prophets. Little footnote in the Bible. Things were kind of rough in those days. But then Jezebel turns around and says she's going to kill him, and all of a sudden his faith in God does what? It just evaporates. He says, oh my God, Jezebel's going to kill me. And he's full of fear, which we know is not a good thing if this is a story from our Hebrew Testament. Don't be full of fear. Why? God is with you. God is with us. It's a constant refrain. So he runs to get away from Jezebel, and he stops in a place where he leaves his manservant and goes on alone. He falls asleep and wakes up, and there is what? There's bread. It says a cake, but it's actually a loaf of bread. They called it a cake. And oil, and an angel talking to him that says, wake up and eat, miraculously. So he wakes up and he eats, and he goes back to sleep. And again the angel appears, another miracle meal. And is he noticing that there's an angel talking to him? No, he pays no attention. He just eats and goes back to sleep. He wakes up again, eats again, and he doesn't say thank you. He doesn't say, look at this miracle, proof that God is with me. He's just like in his own little world. And then God speaks to him and says, what are you afraid of? What are you doing and what are you thinking? And he says this at the very spot where Moses went up to speak to God. So what happens in this story is that the prophet Elijah retraces the steps of our Hebrew ancestors, goes all the way back to this mountain that was just on the other side of the Red Sea, goes to the top of it after he's been miraculously restored with this bread and this wine. He ate a couple of meals, and he went a whole 40 days and 40 nights without any food. This was real miracle food. He gets to the top, and there's God speaking to him at the top of the mountain and saying, what's going on with you, Elijah? What's wrong with you? And Elijah says, oh, poor, 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 pitiful me. I alone am left. There are no prophets left. I just want to die. I can't go on living. He takes no notice that Jezebel can't kill him now. He's way out of the area. A 24-hour period has already elapsed 40 days ago when Jezebel promised she's going to kill him in a day. Did she kill him? No. Was he fed miraculously? Yes. Did God talk to him on the top of the mountain? Yes, he's already talked to him. And he's all full of himself. So then God says to him, well, God's going to pass by, and you need to pay attention. So watch and beware, because God is coming. So he leaves Elijah in this, it's called a cleft. They translate it cave, but it's more correct that it's a cleft, which is exactly where Moses was, on the top of the same mountain. And God sends this wind, and he's not in the wind. He sends, what's next? Earthquake, and he's not in the earthquake. God's not in the earthquake. And then he sends fire. Now, if you remember, when Moses was on top of the mountain, he talked to God, and all of the people, the Hebrew people at the base of the mountain, they felt the earthquake. They saw the wind, and they felt the wind, and they saw the fire, which we think of as a volcano. And they took that as a sign that God was speaking to Moses. So here are all the same signs that Moses had, but God has a trick up his sleeve. He's waiting to see if Elijah says, how wonderful is our God that God can create these winds. How majestic is our God that can create these earthquakes for me to experience. Can you imagine God putting on a show like this for you? It's like better than Disneyland fireworks. I grew up near Disneyland. Fireworks are pretty cool. So there's all this show, and Elijah still doesn't notice. And after all the big show is over, there's the sound of sheer silence, or as our old King James Bible says, a still, small voice. And he says, Elijah, why are you standing here, and what are you doing? Oh, I alone am left of all my ancestors. I just want to die. He's like in a trance. Wake up, Elijah. And notice that this story ends with God saying, get up and get to work. He's like at it with Elijah, who says he still doesn't understand what he's supposed to be doing. So God is very direct. Get up and go. And he's going into the south, where God is sending him, where there are many more prophets. He actually goes from this place to find the next prophet that he's going to hand his staff to and give his cloak to, the famous Elisha, who takes on the work of Elijah. The moral of the story, is God always with us? God is always with us. Do we often see fireworks and not attribute it to God? If Elijah does it, you can bet we do it. Amen.